A forcibly displaced person is someone that has been forced to migrate due to the harsh conditions at his original location. More than 68.5 million persons are in this condition right now. This has been the highest number since World War II. Within this amount, 25.4 million have been considered refugees. The United Nations definition for a refugee is someone that has been forced to flee his or her country because of persecution, war, or violence. Among them, Syrian refugees is the largest refugee group with 6.3 million fleeing due to a war that started in 2011. It is also important to point out that out of the top 10 refugee-producing countries, 7 are from Northern Africa. What do Syria and the north of Africa have in common? Well, they both are extremely close to Europe. They just have to cross the Mediterranean. In just 2018, 77,000 migrants have arrived to Europe by sea. But there is a catch to this. Almost 2,000 have gone missing. This is due to the fact that the conditions on these boats are harsh. They are unsafe and small, and they may sink during the days of travel. A recent survey found out that more than 70% of migrants traveling by boat have been trafficked or exploited at some point during their journey. Many of these migrants are arriving to Greece, a country that is going through a strong financial crisis and does not have the capability of holding any more refugees. Also, many conservatives feel that their security is being threatened. With the resurgence of terrorism in Europe coming from extremist Islamic groups, one must ask if the risk of future attacks is being raised with this situation. It is taking into account this context that we must ask ourselves, what is the correct solution and what approach should we take to get to it? For this presentation, different arguments will be used to show different opinions. It is well known that it is impossible to utilize just one way of knowing at a time, as they all complement each other. Taking this into account, the following arguments should be understood as having one way of knowing emphasized above the others, rather than presenting only one. Emotion is defined as an instinctive feeling distinguished from reasoning or knowledge. The key word in that definition is instinctive. Emotion does not come from what we know or from logic. Emotion rather comes from our most humane part. This is what some like to call our soul. Emotion is what makes us cry, laugh, feel proud, and feel empathy. I ask, how can you have empathy and look at this without wanting to do something? How can someone feel proud of their country if their leaders are giving their backs to this? People are suffering in these war zones. People are drowning while they travel across the sea. Last June, an immigrant from Mali climbed to a fourth-floor balcony just to save a little kid. This is extremely emotional and proves that migrants arriving in Europe should be accepted as quick as possible. Look at this kid, he's no more than 5 years old. He hasn't done anything bad in his whole life. How could some European leaders deny his opportunity for a better life? While you can use emotion like this to offer arguments pro-migration and pro-refugees, you can also argue some arguments against refugees in Europe. For example, some people feel negatively towards them because of all the terrorist attacks. Nice, Paris, Berlin, Brussels, London, Barcelona, Manchester. All of these were done by a Muslim. And what? Should we allow more of them to be entering the borders of Europe freely? Should we bring more, thus increasing the terrorism for threat? Fear is an emotion also, and many Europeans have fear right now because of these terrorist attacks. It is evident that both sides, pro and con refugees, have emotions playing for or against their decision. The most important part of this is deciding what emotions appeal for you the most: fear or empathy. Reason is commonly known as the way in which we try to make some sense of what happens in the world. This is done by using logic, rationality, comparison, and judgment. With this description, to what extent is reason the best way of knowing for solving tough decisions? We can link reason with the area of knowledge of human sciences. For instance, the 10 countries hosting the most refugees are not in Europe. Instead, they are developing and hold only 2.5% of the world's GDP. This is even more impressive upon noting that these 10 countries contain 56% of the world's 21 million refugees. These are developing countries being forced to receive extreme amounts of people with necessities, and their presidents are choosing to remain silent. a reason why the topic remains little known. However, in 2017, 44% less people applied for asylum than in 2018. Statistically, this represents a huge decrease, which should be taken into account by European leaders upon handling the crisis, as it is clear that we may be approaching its end. It is clear that reason should have a huge importance when making decisions, as it will be clear how unfair the situation is on paper. There is always logical arguments for both sides of the coin. In Sweden, for example, the refugee crisis arrived in 2015 when more than 160,000 people applied for asylum in this modern country. You can see how well that went with a sudden rate increment. Despite the decrease in applications in 2017, this is still represented by a vast 728,000 applications. Putting this into perspective, this number is 2 times the population of Iceland. Reason clearly has a huge impact when making decisions that involve statistics. Reason constitutes an objective way of solving these issues. It allows us to take a step back and analyze the reality of the situation without being hindered by distracting factors such as human sentiment and animosity. Memory is present within all humans, regardless of culture, religion, language, or personal background. In utilizing the knowledge of history, we can utilize the web of our past memories in order to make decisions for our future. Every person and every nation has a memory. The stories told by the memories of Africa are ones whose remains can still be seen today. Before European colonization, its vibrant communities were thriving. Colonists came and disrupted this culture. Trade routes were established, and Europeans utilized their military superiority to take over these routes and convert the businessmen into slaves. This destroyed the African economy. To this day, Northern Africa continues to still owe millions of dollars in debt to developed countries. Debt that was obtained when asking for money to repair what colonialism had left behind. Should these memories be seen when solving this crisis? Should European countries remember and repent actions of the past? Or maybe history should work as a reminder and justification of Europe's long-standing superiority. This will depend on whose memories you. Could different ways of knowing allow us to achieve different solutions to the same problem? Undoubtedly, yes. However, we cannot disregard an essential element within the decision-making process: our ingrained beliefs. The same argument can have vastly different points of view depending on what is taken into account. The prevalence of one certain way of knowledge completely changes the verdict in analyzing what is right. The same topic may be taken from a pro or a con mindset. In a scenario where emotion is prevalent, those with a pro-refugee mindset will become overwhelmed with compassion. Their strong humanitarian ideals would move authorities to open borders immediately, regardless of the implications within the economy. As millions of people flooded the continent, the European economy would be deterred. Meanwhile, those against refugees would become overwhelmed by the fear of a terrorist attack. They would call upon authorities to close all borders immediately and display feats of xenophobia against minorities. Upon emphasizing reason, those in favor of refugees would comprehend the lack of action being employed. They would begin to utilize more resources and rationally conclude that threats that come with decreased number of people applying for asylum are much lesser. This would result in a widespread relief as citizens realize their security involved in the process. Within a mindset against refugees, security officials would observe statistics of insecurity within Sweden with incoming migrants and understand that it needs to be stopped. An emphasis upon memory would urge Europeans in favor of refugees to feel culpability due to the past. They would employ an immense desire to provide assistance and do their part within the issue. With an anti-refugee mindset, Europeans would feel superior to Africans and would display a general distaste and avoidance towards them. It is clear that using different ways of knowing does not evoke different solutions. Moreover, in using a different way of knowing, one will not simply experience a change of mindset. What matters most when making a decision is the ingrained perspective that each individual human being displays. Within every way of knowing, a person may find an argument to reinforce his or her own perspective. The human brain makes decisions taking into account all ways of knowing. Ideologies are formed from the union of the same. Separating ways of knowing will only be detrimental in the quest for different solutions. Assumptions are constructed from different analyses and points of view that join together in order to build one perspective. Mindsets regarding the European migrant crisis have already been formulated. Those who believe that no refugee should be accepted have used these different ways of knowing in order to come to that conclusion. Those who believe in their acceptance have done the same. Perspective is key in deciding which end our ways of knowing should serve.